greatest collegiate wrestlers all time. We're going to get to all that, but let's start with your older brother, Vertus Jones, 3-time All-American at West Virginia. What was, some of your fonder memories of watching him at the NCAA tournament for the first time?
Well, if you want to open one up with him, talking about him, why don't you just call him? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. Yeah, no, I say it all the time. Definitely one of the biggest factors of the success that I was able to experience had to do with my older brother. Growing up in the same house as him, kind of coming behind him, doing the same things, drinking the same water, and really able to watch how it's done and witness how it was done. And beyond athletically, just the quality of person he is, the leadership that he possesses, and just how he goes about things. He sets a pretty high standard for himself and for those around him. And I think that was just something I was just able to feed off of. And from a wrestling standpoint, Vertus was a much better athlete than me. I think I was more complete of a wrestler than he was. I think I was a little bit more open-minded to learning new things, where he could be stubborn at times. But still, to watch what he did, I can remember him going to the NCAA finals his sophomore year. I was actually at Pennsylvania State's wrestling myself. Must have been 12 or 13 years old. So he made the finals out of the blue. So
you were there or you weren't there?
No. The Nationals were in Cleveland. I was in Central PA. Well, yeah, I guess kind of Central PA in my own youth state tournament.
Got it.
And I remember, this is before Twitter and really cell phones were very popular. It was somehow the word traveled to Johnstown that he had made the finals, and I just remember the arena kind of buzzing off of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't even know. I've known about you, but I didn't even know you had a brother. And like you said, lo and behold, makes the finals as a sophomore.
Yeah.
And then your youngest.
I actually have two brothers. My younger brother wrestled too. But yeah, Vertus went pretty underrated career. He went 2-3-2 at the NCAA tournament. So that's not an easy feat in itself,
No. So tell me about your childhood. I understand your dad had a wrestling club that he kind of ran out of the basement. How did all that get started?
Yeah. I tell people all the time that everyone asks how young were you when you started wrestling? That's the big question that you turn. How long have you been wrestling? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the warm-up area. Yeah.
yeah. But and I struggle to answer that question because by time you have those conversations, schools letting out, you're going to play baseball this summer. What basketball team you're going to play for? By the time I got old enough to realize that like you had options and you can pick what sports you can play, I was already wrestling for a number of years. So it was just already part of who I was and what we did. But obviously growing up in Western Pennsylvania, we were kind of at the forefront of all the wrestling club culture you see that's so big right now. We were doing that back in the early 90s, just gathering a collection of kids from around the area, and my dad coached us, and he coached us very hard, right out of our basement, probably I don't know, not even the size of a wrestling mat.
Wow.
And it's actually the original house that I grew up in, what became our wrestling room once we put our modular home on top. So I go back home now and I was like, wow, man, this is kind of where everything started. It's just old and dusty now. It's just a basement now, but there's a lot of good wrestlers, a lot of good people that came through the Jones basement. Very thankful and appreciative for having the opportunity to be coached by my father. Some of the guys we talk every now and then, and I've never sat down and got a clear count of the amount of Division I wrestlers or collegiate wrestlers in general that came through our basement at some point. But I if I had to ballpark it, I would say Division 1 wrestlers probably 15 to 18.
Wow.
Probably 25, or if you add like D2, D3 and all that, probably about 25, 30 guys came through there at some point.
So what was your dad's approach to it?
Just work, just work. I remember driving home on the school bus. I see the smoke because we had a wood burning or a coal burning stove coming out of the chimney. And that was when I was already starting to prepare myself for the afternoon training. So you come home, you drop your backpack, you run down my grandfather's driveway up the hill. We called it Rocky Top. There's a big hill up that sits up there. You run that 5 times, run back down, change your shoes, wrestling practice. And then after every single wrestling practice, 300 pull-ups on the pull-up bar.
No, 300.
Every single practice, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
What?
So I got strong, but I also learned how to cheat a little bit too. You know what I mean? We got some funny math, but I mean, right now I couldn't do my shoulders. I couldn't do 5 pull-ups, and that's not exaggeration. But that was the standard he set for us, man. We understood very clearly what the expectations were. There were very hard and clear repercussions if we didn't rise up to that standard, and that just kind of trickled out through all the kids in the club. I mean, this stuff you can't get away with now, not even by a long shot. I can remember we everyone does a stand-up drill on the wall, right? You get your back pressure on the wall, you split up, cut off. But we would spin it around with a partner on top, and at the whistle start, partner's supposed to go knee in the butt, drive you into the wall, and the bottom man has to split up, get your head up, or you break your nose. We call it the towel drill. You start in a half Nelson on your back. This is all true. And the towel that we would use to clean the wrestling mats, after, if you didn't get off your back after 3-5 seconds, that towel went over your face, and you either got off your back or you suffocated. So
that's wild.
That's probably the best I can illustrate what you asked, what my dad's style or how he did it. That's the best way I could encapsulate that.
And so when you went to tournaments, it must have been a little bit of relief for you and your brothers and your teammates.
Yeah, probably. We just make sure we wrestle well, because if we didn't wrestle well, we just drive back home and go right back to the basement. That was not very often that occurred, but fairly regularly that would happen. Yeah.
And I read that you had 2 sisters who were both volleyball players in college. Did he learn that and teach them that as well, or was he just a wrestling guy pretty much?
I appreciate the thoroughness. Is that a word? Thorough? How thorough you are on your interview preparation, Ryan.
Appreciate that.
A lot of people aren't that thorough, but yes, I have 2 younger sisters. Well, there's 5 of us. I'm right in the middle, a brother and sister on each side. Both my sisters played Division 1 volleyball at Eastern Kentucky University, and he was kind of hands off with them. They had a little bit more freedom athletically than the boys had anyway. But it was a sport that they found their passion in, and they were fortunate enough to be able to pursue it. I think all of us have one of the coolest things about my family is if I could brag about us a little bit, that we didn't have much, we didn't have a lot, we didn't, it's one of those things you didn't know you were poor, where you're going through it, and till you grow and you see some of the things like, oh, why don't we ever do a family vacation? Well, there's a lot of time, energy, resources that go to all these damn wrestling tournaments and volleyball tournaments. So all five of us kids went to school on athletic scholarships. All 5 of us graduated with a college degree from working class parents with no college degrees. And all 5 of us have Pennsylvania State athletic medals.
Wow.
So I think that speaks volumes for a lot to my parents and what they were able to instill in us, the values of hard work and dedicating yourself to a specific task and accomplishing it.
That's an amazing stat. And, for your brothers, you guys all wrestled at West Virginia. I don't know much about Morgantown or the sports culture at all. I'm from the Midwest. What is it like there? I hear it's just bananas for sports.
If you don't know or you haven't been to Morgantown, you need to put it on your list.
Okay.
Morgantown, West Virginia is one of the coolest towns in general, but it's obviously a college town. It's 30,000 people about last time I checked. So it's a small town, 25, 30,000 students. One of the very cool and unique things about Morgantown, West Virginia, or West Virginia as a whole, is West Virginia doesn't have any professional sports teams. There's none. You have the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Pittsburgh team's an hour and a half north. Outside of that, West Virginia University is the only show in town. So it's it's the flagship university. It's the flagship athletic program. And I think what you see probably in the last 8 or 10 years, whenever I was coaching in West Virginia, we did a lot of good recruiting on low expectations. Bringing a guy down is like, oh, West Virginia, you guys have power and water and all this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I say that exaggerating, but a little bit, because West Virginia unfortunately has that reputation. But I would say in the last 8 to 10 years, since the conference realignment stuff started then, and moving to the Big 12 and just the flush of resources that go along with that conference realignment. I don't get back there too often, but every time I go back, something's new, something's getting built, redoing the football stadium, redoing the basketball arena. So they're really facility-wise really starting to work their way towards that upper tier of athletic programs.
And was there any doubt that you were going to go there coming out of high school?
I said, because you're young, you don't know no better, you're the man, these coaches are calling you. And I always said that I was going to keep my options open. I'm my own guy, kid, you know what I mean? But in hindsight, I don't know how honest or how true that was. Of course, I grew up, probably 80-minute drive from Morgantown. So that allowed a whole family to stay involved in Burgess's career once he went there. I'd been there several times, been some matches, spent the night a couple of times. But I still really thought that I wanted to experience the recruiting process. As it turned out, I played football, I played baseball, I ran track. And I never fit in a visit to any other school. When the signing date came, coaches came up, I said, let's go, I'm Mountaineer. That's about as hard as it was.
Didn't get to one other trip. That's awesome.
No, I didn't visit anywhere else.
So you're, I got to imagine when you get there your first year, before the practices start, a game day, like a Saturday game day at West Virginia as a college guy, it's got to be just one of the best things. Did you just relish in the environment, or were you guys working out August and September?
A little bit of both. College game day atmosphere in Morgantown is a very unique experience that everyone should experience one time in their life.
You talked me into it in the past 5 minutes.
Well, it's cool. That's one of the cool things about the East Coast. If someone was to make that visit, you can hit, I don't know how many different wrestling schools in, a 3 or 4 hour radius, but no, I was a big college football fan. I went to all the football games, and there's one thing about that haunts me to this day. In my college career, I missed one practice. It was a football weekend. We went out doing the whole college thing Friday night. I woke up, said, oh, no. But I had a choice to make. It was either hurry up, run in, catch the end of practice, or just get my tailgate gear on and go straight to the tailgate. And I had my first cell phone on. My coach called me. I said, I know, coach. And, I was good. I always did what I was supposed to do. So and he knew that, so he had to let me feel a little bit, but he didn't beat me up too much about it because I think he knew. It still bothers me. It's still missing that practice. It still bothers me terribly.
What grade were you in?
I was obviously drinking age, Ryan.
So I'm thinking if this is a freshman Greg Jones, that's a different story, and you're coming in. But I mean, I got to imagine your training regiment was pretty relentless, just from what your pops had instilled. You know, once you had gotten in college, you won your first NCAA title. What was your regiment like? You know, off season and kind of leading up to the kickoff of the season.
You know, I was stubborn. Like I said, especially I didn't wrestle outside of wrestling season until maybe my second year of college. So everyone's asked, like, how'd you get so good so fast? I just started wrestling. Like, I started, not that I never didn't take it serious,
right?
But I'm a believer that you should do as many sports as you can for as long as you can, and that's what I did. But actually, after my redshirt season, my first year in Morgantown, I redshirted. Mm-hmm. Halfway through the year, we had a bunch of guys fall off. I came out of redshirt and wrestled probably 6 or 7 matches, and I hurt my shoulder. And I came back out, and I ended up getting a medical redshirt. And that's also one of the biggest factors that I was able to have success off the bat. That going to open tournaments and stuff like that's cool. But I got the chance to get in there and get some live action, some mm-hmm. real life experience without it costing me anything. So I already kind of knew what to expect. But after that season, I went home for the summer. I played baseball. I played on 2 Legion baseball teams all summer. My coaches never knew. I was just being a kid. That led, and then obviously once I got back to Morgantown my second year, I got a little bit more serious. I started, really jumping into the strength and conditioning component of everything. Obviously was in the room, not a ton, but enough to grow and develop some skills. And that's kind of that lined up with my redshirt experience is what allowed me to start kind of taking those jumps.
And I got to imagine one of the turning points in your life, besides going to Morgantown, was your redshirt sophomore year. You're on an incredible win streak. You walk through the tournament as a freshman, and you end up losing in the first round and not placing. How did that impact the rest of your career?
You read it in books all the time, all things about adversity and all that kind of stuff. And I say it all the time. That was the most valuable wrestling experience that I could have ever had. Would it have been nice to have been the 3rd or 4th four-timer? Sure. Would I have became as more of a complete and a better wrestler had that not happened? I'm not so sure. So, I mean, it's just life. It's like a established. If you could break stats down any way you want to. You know what I mean? It's like I'm the first number 1 seed returning national champion to lose in the first round the following year. You know what I mean? So, but I'm appreciative. I'm thankful for that experience. I think I handled it kind of the best I could. But to be honest with you, Ryan, I was ready to be done. It was just kind of one of those things. I mean, there were times throughout that sophomore season where I would be so hard on myself warming up for a match or something. I could remember thinking right before stepping on the mat sometimes, like, man, this would be so much easier if I just went out there and lost. It's like kind of one of those things. If you don't care, it don't hurt, right? Mm-hmm. And I can remember kind of battling those demons. Obviously, I never threw a wrestling match. But I think it's a good lesson for younger wrestlers and kids to know that no one is immune from these types of emotions and feelings. We all go through it. And how do we learn to channel them, embrace them, and use them to empower us to do something incredible?
Why do you think you felt that way before a match?
I was just very hard on myself throughout the entire year. My freshman when I won nationals my freshman year, I came up, I shook the opposing coach's hand, I came over, I hugged my coaches, I stepped off the stage, and Zeke goes to me. Zeke Jones was my coach, him and Craig Turnbull. He said, "Hey," he patted me on the chest and was like, "You know what's better than winning a national title?" I said, "What?" He said, "Winning 2, 3, or 4." And I'm getting goosebumps saying that, telling you that. And that's when it hit me in my head. It's like, oh shit, we're really doing something here. You know what I mean? But I remember hearing that, and I never really internalized that I had wrestled for a very long time. I wanted to be a national champion, and I did that in a manner which looked, it could be perceived as relatively easy.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I refocus, reframe my career in a sense, and set this goal that no one has ever done before? I mean, that very few people have done before.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just this big internal conflict that entire off season leading up into the wrestling season. But I was going to do it. You know, I in my head, I was set, I'm going to be a 4-time NCAA champion. I'm going to do it. And I just fell out of love with the process. I got super serious. I didn't go out one time during the wrestling season. I could remember winning a 5-3 match, being all pissed off because I just wasn't appreciating the small victories that that are involved in building a successful career, really a successful anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just piling it on top. And I was undefeated. I mean, I had a lot of close matches, but I went through the regular season undefeated. I just kept on beating myself up. By the time I got to the national tournament, I had nothing left. I was there. I was intent on competing hard. I mean, don't mistake that. But I was just flat.
Were you cutting a lot or not? Not too bad.
I cut a little bit of weight, but I was a 74-pounder. You know what I mean? I ended up moving up the following year because I did grow a little bit. But it wasn't a weight loss issue. It was again, I think it was just putting, I hate that you put too much pressure on yourself, because what does that even mean, right? But I guess that's what I'm trying to describe. I was very, very hard on myself.
I had read that getting ready for this, and it reminded me of a story I had heard. Brandon Slay said the most valuable thing Dave Schultz taught him was not to take himself too seriously. And it's like, just, so it's like, I heard you had said that about that experience. I'm like, man, that's right. Because sometimes everyone's just so serious in wrestling, so is that something that happened after that sophomore tournament?
I don't know if I started being less serious. I think I just learned to understand myself more. So I can remember, like, throughout my sophomore year, that kind of pre-match, I would always get like gas, indigestion, like gas in my stomach. I have to burp a lot before a match. It's never happened to me before. It never happened to me after, and that's the only thing I could kind of reduce it to. I learned to embrace all those things. I learned to use those pre-match feelings to my advantage, to understand that this is just an experience that goes along with doing something difficult, doing something hard, doing something that could lead you somewhere really cool, right?
Yeah. Now everyone seems to have those moments. And once you had gotten through that, your junior and senior year, won every match, what were some of your, like, if you're coaching kids and helping them get ready for matches, like, what were some of your pre-match routines, either mentally or physically?
I wish if we weren't recording, I could, and I had a few extra minutes, I could probably break down the whole pre-match routine minute by minute. I wasn't a music guy. I didn't do headphones. I kind of get lost in my own brain a little bit. I had all my timing spaced out whenever I'm in the hole to on the deck. I think that's probably one of the most valuable things about my childhood wrestling. That I wrestled again. I wrestled 3 months a year, 4 months a year, but we'd wrestle 150 matches in that
Mm-hmm.
amount of time. But the mat time and start to understand to learn how to compete was very, very valuable. That I thought that I understood my body very well. I could remember at a young age going through different emotions in my head, trying to be tough, that little kid at the wrestling tournament is all mean and stuff. I could remember going through that phase, and I could remember doing that as an 8 or 9 year old kid and thinking that didn't feel right. Let me try this. Let me try, and like kind of tinkering with it and tinkering with myself. Sorry.
No problem.
But really, I understand. I got at the young age. I got that process pretty good. Then the sophomore year happened. That experience allowed me to add on top of it, and really just get a really refined approach and really understand what I needed and where I needed to get to compete at optimal level.
I know people are going to ask, feel free to share any details about it though. I mean, like 5 minutes out, were you sweating? Were you drilling? I mean, what was some of the things that were a cornerstone of that routine?
Well, initially in my college career, I would never drill before a match. And Zeke Jones like, what do you mean? Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's kind of one of those things too. It's 7 minutes now, right? 7 minutes. I don't want to get out there, get that additional minute. I don't want to burn energy and go out there and get tired. You know what I mean? But always sweating. Obviously a lot of quick feet stuff. If we get ready for a dual meet, I would go in before weigh-ins and get probably a 30 or 40 minute workout in. I would get a hard drill. Then I would do 1 to 2 sparring or flow wrestling matches, and I would finish that off with a couple hard shots. And I'd go weigh in. I would refuel, and then I always wore sneakers. So 4 matches out, I would take my sneakers off, put my wrestling shoes on, tape them up, and kind of let everything build going up until when I was in the hole. When I was in the hole, I would start off. I start off do some stance of motion, bust out some sprints. Not generally at that moment would I drill. It was a lot of jumping, a lot of moving, a lot of quick feet stuff, but always a sweat. I always stepped out on the mat sweating. I would never go out there cold, whether there's a fall that happened before me or not. And then
so
you
you
a
wouldn't
couple leg slaps, a couple jumps, and go out there.
You wouldn't do anything from the weigh-in to when you're in the hole though, since you had already gotten that workout ahead of time?
I would be in the dual meet.
Yeah.
I would just be in the teammate.
It's funny you say that about the shoes, because our wrestling club, when I was a kid, used to take us to Iowa, and all those guys were wearing their running shoes. I'm like, God, that must be a college thing, not to walk around all day in your wrestling shoes. So the next time I had my running shoes on, my dad's like, put your wrestling shoes on. What are you doing?
Well, yeah, I don't want to be confused for one of them old school Iowa guys. So here's the reason. Our wrestling room was detached from the arena, so I had to walk across. I just kept them on.
There you go. I mean, I was looking at your some of the guys you battled, and really you didn't have many close matches, but one name I saw a couple of times was Brian Glenn from Illinois. He's been on the show before and is a big friend of the podcast. What do you remember?
What's he doing now?
I don't even. He's a high school teacher and a high school wrestling coach at a suburb in South Chicago.
That kind of fits.
You remember that name?
Of course. That's the thing too, is I never really developed a rivalry.
Right.
You know what I mean? Askren had Pendleton. You go on. Brian Glenn is probably my most common opponent. We wrestled probably only wrestled probably 4 or 5 times. Him and Paul Bradley. He had that long, slow, but long, deceptive single leg shot to your lead leg. with the goal of just getting his hands locked. And when he got his hands locked, he had really flexible shoulders and a good grip. And he's able to get his back up and kind of inch underneath you and submarine underneath you and eventually get head position. But he got to my leg, not often, but as consistently as anyone, because he was really good at timing my front foot. I don't think I was really able to ever really split the score on him. I think probably the biggest win I had over him was probably only 4 or 5 points, but he was really good at holding position. He was well coached. He was able to keep the score low.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep me under 6 points, you have a lot better chance of beating me, because I wasn't going to be beat in a shootout. I wasn't going to lose a 15-13 match ever. I don't want to say it, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, he was always a tough one for me.
Got to give a shout out to Brian Glenn. But Greg Jones, you're on another level when we're talking about guys getting to your leg as a close match. I mean, that it's amazing you had the internal motivation to keep yourself going without that rival through all those years, and obviously capped off the career, 3 national titles, 4 losses ever. But then you, after coaching, kind of following that route, you started as a beginner again, so to speak, as like kind of uprooting and moving to Florida, and you're an MMA coach, and you had never done that before. Yeah. And I just think that's awesome when now you're one of the top in the game, you and Henry Hooft. You got this new gym, which I want to talk about, but Henry Hooft is a name I've heard a lot about just from Joe Rogan. I don't know anything about the guy really. How did you get paired up with him, and like, who is he in his particular world?
Yeah, no, I mean, from our previously, I was talking about Morgantown. I was in a position where I thought that I would never leave Morgantown, West Virginia. I thought I would retire as a wrestling coach there. Fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, that's how life happens. I'm not. I randomly got a call from, a text, DM on Twitter from Rashad Evans. Rashad Evans, my sophomore year, is the guy that bumped me out of the NCAA wrestling tournament. Mm-hmm. He was getting ready for John Jones. He asked me to come down and help him train. I came down for 3 or 4 days, and I remember leaving excited about the opportunity, but mind blown about how behind the sport of MMA was. This is the amount of resources, the training methods, just everything was just crazy to me, and not in a good way. So as things would go, I don't know, 5 or 6 years later, Rashad called me and said, "Hey, we got a job open." You look at it, so I'll come down and look at it. And so I came down, ran a class, went back home, and told my wife, "I think I'm moving to Florida." So anyway, I was fortunate enough to be able to get lined up with Henry. We hit it off pretty good. He and I, we kind of, the way he sees striking, I see wrestling as far as distance and angles and things like that. I see in spacing. I see it very similar. So our styles kind of fit together. Outside of that, Henry Hooft is the realest person you ever meet. You will never, not once have I ever thought, gee, I wonder what Henry thinks about me, because he'll just straight up tell you. I think that trickles down to our team too, is that we don't, not that we're immune to it, we just don't have a lot of drama in our gym, because he's just a pretty straightforward black and white kind of guy, and he is a very good leader and a very good coach. It amazes me too sometimes that he basically grew up a kickboxer, working in the kickboxing gym, but it blows my mind that he never really had any formal coaching training, but still how good he is, without that, but I'm very thankful. I'm very grateful for our relationship. We started our current gym probably with Sanford MMA probably 2 or 3 years ago. I don't know how time goes. But we're really in a position to really change the face of the sport. So it's interesting kind of how life goes, that those feelings I left with that, 5 or 6 years prior, um, about how low the resources, how poorly the fighters were taken care of. I'm just now getting to the point here, 6 or 7 years in, with a relationship with Sanford Health to be able to start touching some of those areas and really take a swing at the original things of my first exposure to the sport, coming back around now, and I'm able to do them with our partners and put some of those things into action to really change how the fighters were cared for, change their pre-fight, post-fight experience, and eventually, hopefully, if we're good enough or lucky enough, we can change some lives. I get nothing better than seeing my guys have kids, a guy closing on his first home, so it's just a really neat atmosphere. We got about 40 fighters, 50 fighters from all over the world, all different cultures, all different colors. And it's just a beautiful thing. I don't think there's anything cooler for me than seeing a collection of individuals build towards a common goal. And that's what we're trying to do.
It's awesome because it sounds like it's more similar to a D1 wrestling room than some gyms are. It seems like you guys are all kind of training together. Is that common in MMA, or is it more like kind of one-off training?
I don't know because I try to keep my own backyard clean.
Yeah.
I honestly can't speak to how a lot of gyms are run. Just the feedback that we get, we're in the midst of doing something really cool and maybe pretty special with the athletes and the partners that we have. But that is a very good analogy, especially with my background. That's what I bring, right? If you go somewhere new, you want to be able to take yourself and what you're good at and affect that culture, not jump in there and have that culture affect who you are. And that, again, that's where I'm circling back around that. And I think we're on a pretty good run right now. But I think where we make the most difference is structure and organization. And I think that will continue to be how we separate ourselves from just being another MMA gym.
Is that structuring the trainings throughout the week or more like a annual basis?
Both, everything. I mean, and just understanding, everyone has a responsibility. Everyone's accountable to each other. There has yet to be a true mixed martial arts team. If you want to take a professional sports model, let's go ahead and do that and apply it to MMA.
Man,
that's what we're trying to do anyway.
That's awesome. And you mentioned Sanford Health. Seems like they're just crazy into sports. They have a huge, based out of the Dakotas, huge facility out there. They're getting involved with the gym down in Florida. And I got to ask, how did that happen? Because like I said, they're out of South Dakota. So what's the connection there?
So our partner is Dave Martin. Dave Martin lives in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We started off with him. He was already representing 3, 4, or 6 of our fighters. I don't know, a handful. And we just started bouncing ideas off of each other. We had some other partners in mind. The idea being that he wants to go out there and land that whale of a partner, right? Once we do that, then we're able to fill in with still very good, very recognizable partners that want to be attached to that Sanford brand. Dave Martin has a 20-year working relationship with Sanford Health. Sioux Falls, South Dakota is also a really cool town. It's a hidden gem out in the upper Midwest. It's just a real cool small town. People are nice, food's good. So like I said, he pitched a few larger corporations, and here Sanford Health was sitting right here in front of them. Once we got our coaching staff lined up, got our fighters in place, he made the pitch, and here we are.
The facility looks awesome. I was looking at some pictures online. I mean, and like you said, just the approach you guys are taking seems more holistic. So one of the last things I wanted to
Good
ask.
word. Good word.
Holistic. Okay.
Good word.
Put that on the shirts.
Yeah.
How would you, so knowing what you know now and learning, taking your coaching to the next level, how do you think you would do things different if you were a college coach? Or what are some, misconceptions in like high school or college coaching that you'd like to straighten out just based on what you learn now and, being a professional coach at the highest level?
Huh. That's an interesting question. And questions like this, I generally don't answer too well.
I'm just like nutrition, sleep. I don't know if like anything like that where we're in college, you're like, man, we really didn't focus on that, but now it's one of the biggest things we do.
I don't know, Ryan. If I was to go back and coach college right now, what would I do differently? There's obviously a lot of learning that has taken place since I last coached a college wrestling match. So I would think that I would apply some of those things forward, but what would it be? I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know what, though? I sit here and think about it. If I run a wrestling class on Wednesday, that wrestling class wouldn't be much different than if I showed up to University of Red a wrestling class. So I don't know. I have to think about that.
That's interesting because when you talk about showing up and structuring a class the same way, are you teaching like you would, like if you have a fighter who's a striker, are you teaching them like you would like a middle schooler learning how to start, or is it all done through the lens of like fighting?
So let me rephrase that. The content's obviously going to be a little bit differently, but as far as structure and organization, I wake up and I do fundamentals of wrestling every day.
Mm-hmm.
Positioning, head position, understanding how to get heavy, understanding how to move your feet in small circles, tight angles. You'd be surprised how much I got to teach how to lift another human off the floor. A lot of these guys haven't played any of their sports. A lot of my fighters have just been fighters. So I think there's a lot of value physically in having a diverse background of athleticism. But if I tell some of them to get in their stance, they don't know how to bend their knees, and still be mobile and still be able to move. So a lot of fundamentals, with the idea being, if all these champions are wrestlers, right? Then I'm not going to teach these guys. I don't necessarily teach them how to wrestle, but if I could teach them how to move, read, and react like a wrestler and be the first guy to the position, then we have a chance, and then that's kind of my broader goal. And then I kind of fill in the gaps with technique or different concepts and stuff like that. But a lot of fundamental wrestling concepts that carry over.
That's the cool thing though, because your gym, a lot of strikers in there because of, Henry Hoof attracts that kind of talent. And so it's not like it's an AKA where it's known for the, the college wrestlers stable, so to speak. So
not yet. Not yet.
Is that the focus?
I mean, we want to win.
Yeah.
You win with wrestlers, right?
Hell yeah.
But so I've been on this thing. So I've been doing this, like I said, 6 or 7 years. And I have this idea in my head is using wrestling as a tool to enhance your overall athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what I do. I know this is going to be a little bit more wrestling specific. It may be a little bit more wrestling specific than you're going to experience in that cage. But at the very least, we comprehend and understand our body positioning, how to apply force, how to put your foot in the floor and change speeds. So yeah, that's my day in a nutshell.
I never thought about it as athleticism like that. The just natural things wrestlers do, that those kind of movements aren't natural to other, folks who are even in striking.
Yeah, well, you're just broadening at least in my head, this is how